Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 13, lucky number 13 of Nutanix Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got Harvey Green from XenTegra, XenTegra's guru on all things Nutanix. How's it going, Harvey?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Hey, I'm sorry, Jirah and I talked to you about doing that Kubernetes podcast. Now we're going to force you to do something else, but no, I'm just joking.
We're holding back Harvey in a number of ways. We're limiting his options.
Yeah. This time I appreciate you holding me back.
I was looking forward to learning some Kubernetes, but maybe on a different day. We have Jirah Cox with us. Jirah and Harvey are going to help us walk through a podcast where we cover the 5 reasons why Nutanix delivers the best hybrid and multi-cloud platform. This is a blog from a month or so ago. Jirah, how's it going?
Good, man. Welcome back from vacation. You all rested up?
No.
Yeah, you need a vacation from your vacation.
Vacation part 2, yeah.
I almost always need a vacation from my vacation. I've got a wife, 4 kids. We hike tens of thousands of steps every day and then sit on the beach in the afternoon. I wouldn't have it any other way, but I could stand to have an adult sit at the bar, watch the waves, vacation sometime soon.
Yes.
Have you guys had a chance to go on vacation yet this year?
Not in the same way as normal. We've been taking a couple of short day trips where we go say hi to the beach or go say hi to the mountains, and then we come back.
All in one day?
Sometimes it's shorter than others. The mountains, of course, are much shorter than trying to go to the beach, but
yeah,
just no long ones. Not right now.
Well, maybe that'll be back in full swing in a month or 2 or 6.
Yeah.
Jirah, how about yourself? You and how many you have kids, right?
We have 2 kids. They're about to be 8 and 5, and we're embarking on we're tiptoeing into camping with them. So we've done backyard stuff. So we're taking a crawl, walk, run approach.
Let me know how that goes. I wish I'd have done more camping with my older kids. I've got a 12-year-old getting ready to be 12-year-old. I think he and I are going to do some camping once we get the older 3 out of the house.
I've done a lot, and they're excited to do a lot. So should be good.
Now, are we talking camping? Or are we talking glamping? Or what are we talking about? Are you going to go?
Yeah. Wait. This might level set. We bought them camping bunk beds that weigh 70 pounds. So it's definitely car camping. Not sure if we're into full-on glamping.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just envisioning you carrying 70 pounds worth of bunk beds.
Exactly.
In the mountains on the Appalachian Trail trying to find a campsite.
Not really in the ultralight category, yeah.
Well, I hope to do some of that in the coming years. I'm going to force myself. I think I need to. I just the sleeping on the ground thing sounds like a good idea until you do it.
Well, it's probably been, I think I had about a 20-year stint of not camping between like when I left Boy Scouts and then like in our backyard a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And in between somehow my back changed a lot, changed a whole lot.
I bet.
Let's take a look at our blog of choice here. This one where we're talking about Nutanix being a good platform for the hybrid and multi-cloud world. So Jirah, can you help us just kind of setting the stage here as to why this is even a relevant blog?
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're touching today on like why it's a good fit for, organizations that are looking to establish a beachhead, right, of private cloud and public cloud working together, forming their organization's hybrid cloud.
Right. Which, let's stop for a minute and just define. We're talking about cloud. We're talking about infrastructure as a service primarily. We're talking about really just a bunch of data centers. The other data centers just belong to someone else, and you pay for the right to use it, as well as your own data center. I meet many people probably on a weekly basis that think the cloud is actually something, and it's really not. It's just services of certain types that come from somewhere else, and you just consume it as a service, and AKA the cloud, right?
Abstraction all the way down. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what is Nutanix doing here? Let's see. The first one says self-service, no need for third-party intervention. In other words, you don't have to learn all the different cloud provisioning models and management. Is that what we're talking about?
I think it's part of it. Yeah, I think it's both of that as well as the self-service aspect, right? Meaning that whatever team in your organization has the rights to do so can stand up a Nutanix cluster within your corporately managed VPC, right? The VPC is like your cloud data center network, has subnets within it, and you can say, hey, this is my Apache development dev space. I can go drop a Nutanix cluster on that in a few minutes, right? Just by asking for it. And then, of course, what this is also highlighting, right, is that when you're doing that, you're only running code from Nutanix on AWS, right? There's no third party that's involved in orchestrating that, bringing that to life, managing it as a service, none of that, right? This is just a you and Nutanix relationship.
And so the intent here is that someone who learns Nutanix and how to manage it on premises can do the same thing in AWS and someday Azure and maybe GCP. They go into a single Prism platform to do this? Are they going to separate platforms or either?
Both and yes. Yeah. So it's going to form a real cluster, right? Every cluster we run runs Prism Element, so which is local management for that cluster as a highly available service. And then it also can connect up to your Prism Central instance for global management as well. Mm-hmm. Centralized alerting.
Harvey and Jirah, both you guys, I think you guys work together with customers where you said, hey, let's give this a shot. And 15 minutes later, an hour later, whatever it was a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah.
They were up and running in a cloud, AWS in this case.
Right.
And that was manageable from both the on-premises, Prism Central. And then I guess it's up to them to have some type of connectivity into that cloud.
Yeah, that customer specifically did have a VPN already established, which we used to both for that connectivity to Prism Central, but also for replication, right? To send up in their case, VDI gold master images, right? So they already had them on-prem. Yep. We copied them to the cloud, and then we're able to create a Citrix pool up there in the cloud. But the other cool thing is yeah, to your point, it stood up so fast when we were reviewing the procedures to sort of operationalize the whole thing as a DR environment.
Right.
They have so many desktops that they actually grew beyond the scope of one cluster, right? It's a pretty common constraint right now that HCI clusters in the cloud have about a 16 node limit. And they needed about 24, I think was the scale for how many desktops they needed to run. And so we were debating like, do they need to run 2 pilot light clusters, right? 3 nodes here and 3 nodes there, and scale each one out. And we thought about it. We were like, well, no, this thing stood up so fast, right? It was like 40 minutes or so worth of beginning to end stopwatch time that you can just go create a second cluster when you declare a disaster. And by the time you fill up the first cluster, the second cluster is online and open for business.
Right.
Now, if they didn't have that connectivity into their cloud of choice, in this case, AWS, can it work over public connectivity, or they have to have that connectivity in place?
So it would come down to your apps, but I could absolutely envision that, right? There's a way that you could operationalize your updates to like your gold master image, that if you stored them on maybe public S3 storage, that that would work with a URL retrieval, right? I can just upload that to S3 storage and then get a URL to pull it back down. Then my image is ready to be dropped on any cluster in the world, including a cluster on AWS. So then I could have that run without plumbing to get back to my on-prem data center. And then, of course, I would need DNS and NetScalers publishing my desktops out to the world. But yeah, that could totally work.
Well, how about the Prism Central piece of it? Is it going to need? Can it go to the 2 different clusters over 2 different networks as long as I guess it has connectivity? How does that work?
Today, that wouldn't work. That would assume you'd want to run a cluster almost as like a dark site, right? Like a no internet access. It would have internet access in this case, but not connected back to your Prism Central instance, which is not required, right? Especially for a DR use case, right? The value of Prism Central is like centralized visibility, updates, runway management, right? This cluster has 6 weeks left of capacity forecasting. So if it was a burstable, ephemeral DR cluster, maybe less value in having it connected back to Prism Central.
Yeah. So Harvey, your thoughts on this, having done it a couple of times?
Yeah, I mean, the most amazing aspect to this is being able to go from zero to hero and how quickly you can do that. And this kind of is hitting on that too, is you've got the ability from a self-service standpoint to say, you know what, we're going to go do that today. And you can actually go physically deploy it today, like right now. And the flexibility that gives you, I think is key. I mean, you know yourself, we've had a lot of conversations over the past year where, people were very much wanting to do a zero to hero type deployment. And they were also, constrained by, I only have this much hardware, right? This gives you a way that you go do it right now. You don't have to buy anything else. You don't have to put anything else in your data center. You can do these things right now. And I think that is, a very big deal that people need to be paying attention to. This is what going to public cloud was all about, right? Making sure that you've got hardware on demand to go and set up for your deployment and be able to take a deployment from, plan to actual realization of the concept and then move it into production. I mean, this is what this is for.
For every customer, for every need, right, there's always a cost versus outcomes, a buy versus rent breakpoint, and everyone's going to be unique that way. But I think we've all sat in a meeting where we've kind of just wanted to facepalm and go like, guys, I could have this running by the end of this meeting.
Right.
How important is this to the business? Like, yeah, renting has its own economics, right? We all own cars, but we do occasionally Uber when we need to. Tell me what kind of project is this? We can solve this.
Right. And Ubering doesn't have to mean a worse experience. It could mean a lot better experience. I was on vacation a week and a half ago, and Ubering to the place you're going versus having to park 8 parking lots away. There's value in that.
Right.
Absolutely. There's and the cloud providers know that as well. There's certainly value in that. So it's goes both ways for sure.
They stake their business model on it.
Well, and then the argument is, you talk to someone like Steve Kaplan over at Nutanix, he'll talk about, and there's money to be saved. It may not feel like it at the surface level, but not, having the peace of mind that your car's not going to get towed from way over there when you took an Uber to get there.
Right.
Knowing that there's costs that are going to pop up when you have to drive your car there. Somebody's going to back into you. There's things that happen along the way that you can just eliminate when you do it as a service.
Absolutely. And I mean, the other part of that too, that the cloud providers know as well, is that costs aren't always just measured in dollars. I mean, there's time, there's skill, there's training. You also got to pay people to do certain things, make sure that the lights are still blinking green instead of flashing red. You have all of those other things that you have to account for that the cloud providers are taking care of for you.
Well, you don't have to be attached to too many sort of like nightmare endless IT projects to know. I mean, and you guys do professional services all day, every day. There's value in completion of a project, right?
Absolutely.
What does it cost when that project takes 10 times longer to get finished,
Absolutely.
So
yeah. And if you've ever been a project where, your connectors to your SAN or your fiber network didn't show up on time and the whole project stopped because you needed $30 connectors that
I do remember. I remember one project years ago where the field engineer told me, and he's like, yeah, I'm working around the logistics and what hasn't arrived on site yet. I stood up vCenter running on an NFS share to a data domain. I'm like, wow, that's probably not the first, but that's in rare air there.
Right.
And was he proud of this?
No, he was proud. He was making forward progress on the project.
Right. Yeah. Well, sometimes, moving the ball 1 yard when you need 10 is okay if it feels, if it makes you feel better about it, right?
If it's dumb and it works, it's not that dumb. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about section 2, which might be really one of the biggest business arguments for this, and that's license portability, whether you're doing it on premises, where you're doing it in this cloud, that cloud, or some cloud we don't even know about yet.
Yeah. No, for sure. Like that portability is what we were aiming for when we reinvented ourselves a couple of years ago to go software only, right? To where Nutanix is only a software company, even though you can get our logo on hardware nodes, if you choose, right, among 15 other different kinds of flavors of hardware you can run on. But driving towards that portability to say, whether you're refreshing hardware on-prem to take advantage of bigger, faster nodes on-prem or moving to the cloud, that portability is what lets you treat the software as an asset that actually, believe it or not, actually an asset that appreciates in value over time, and can run where you want it to run. So move it to the cloud, move it back on-prem, change data centers, change hardware providers, all of which are an option for you. For planned needs and for unplanned needs, you can even rent the licenses you need to run Nutanix in AWS on demand. So really kind of both options there for like capitalizing on the licenses and and buying them in bulk in advance, or buying them on demand and renting them by the hour, I believe. So both options available.
I've never really thought about this, but if you do have licenses that you can continue to use forever, and yes, you're paying some type of maintenance on it, but it's kind of like having maybe like a condo or something where, yes, you're paying for this HOA, but in theory, it's adding value along the way, that as long as you keep getting the value out of why you bought it, then yeah, it does kind of appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, it only gets more features, not less. Support. We've got metrics behind this, but even let's just as a straw man say it stays equal, no change, right? It stays static. In reality, it even improves. More features, great support over time. Yeah, it really is a software asset.
Right.
The hardware, the best day of any hardware is day one, right?
Yeah.
That is correct. Yeah, I mean,
Harvey, any other thoughts on the licensing point of being able to take it wherever you need to?
I mean, honestly, on that topic, the customers who talk to me any period of time, or anybody who's been, on a podcast or a class or anything with me, they'll know that I am all about being able to be flexible. I mean, at this point in IT, if you're designing yourself into a hole where you've only got one way you can do things, you're designing yourself to be out of a job. At this point, you've got the ability to do things on-prem, do them in the cloud, and with Nutanix and their license portability, you can do it anywhere at any time, and transfer from one to the other if that's what you need to do. You need to make sure that you have flexibility in your deployments today. That's just what it is at this point. I mean, I don't know any better way to describe it. You have to have flexibility in your deployments today.
And that's flexibility for what you don't even know is coming.
Right. I mean, and that's kind of the point, right? You have no idea what is coming. So you have to be able to make it so that you're not the one stuck between a rock and a hard place. Let that be, somebody else, or for some other reason besides IT. You have to be able to support the company and the end users however you need to, and whether that's on equipment you can touch or equipment that you can't touch, you need to be able to support people.
So this next topic 3 says native cloud networking, no need to re-engineer your network. Learning these cloud technologies, these IaaS technologies, there's a big section on storage. There's a big section on networking. Jirah, is this kind of saying that you guys have built this to just blend right into whatever the cloud offerings network management solution looks like?
Yeah, that's actually perfect. Yeah. So with cloud networking, some things get way easier. Some things get different. Some things are a bit more complex, but this is definitely solidly in the easier category, right? So within that VPC, your virtual private cloud, you're basically call it your data center cloud router within the cloud. Adding a subnet is a breeze, right? You just click, add new subnet, and it's going to be 172.16. whatever. And if you know how to do that, adding it to Nutanix is like 2 more clicks. You just go add new AHV network 172.16 and done. So it's literally that easy. What this is highlighting is there's no extra overlay needed. You get to use the native cloud networking on your cluster on Nutanix. We're not encapsulating, we're not defining a lot of stuff in software that doesn't have to be, because the AWS network itself is already great, high performance. We can connect your VMs on Nutanix right to that.
And Jirah, in this situation, do you still have management networks? You still have storage only networks? You still have VM traffic networks? All this same logic still applies?
You sure can. And you sure can. It's even easier to have more purpose-built networks if you want to, because every single subnet I can wrap in its own security group, have its own ACLs about what it can and can't do. So it's actually way easier for people like the VM admin to define that stuff in a way that it'd be harder for them to do, like with a Cisco CLI in a network data center environment.
You're saying there's pretty pictures.
It's all, I mean, everything in the cloud is like an API call away, right? So, but yeah, it also is in the GUI for sure.
So Harvey, any thoughts, additional thoughts on the networking aspect of learning how to do it on premises, learning how to do it in one cloud using the Nutanix approach? You really aren't reinventing what you already know about how to manage networks in the cloud. Any thoughts on that?
Right. No, that's basically the point, right? You're getting the flexibility to continue using the things that you're using. One of the examples that they brought in here was that if you use Cisco ACI right now, you can continue to do that. Right? You can use the knowledge that you already have instead of having to relearn everything to figure out how to make this one thing networking work over here, and how does that integrate with my Nutanix cluster. All of that stuff can be taken care of in one place, and you can use the knowledge you already have to make things work right now.
So number 4 here talks about built-in security groups, improved data protection. That just goes along with some of the security elements that are in these public clouds, these IaaS solutions. Sounds like Nutanix is just playing along with that.
Yeah, you mentioned a management subnet a minute ago, and out of the box, right? I think we still set this up with CloudFormation templates, right? So actually, the AWS way to define a multi-node service as a template, we use that even for standing up our clusters. So it's very AWS networking centric, very native. And so these security groups come out of the box already knowing like what ports we need for AOS to function, right? For Prism replication, all that good stuff. You're not having to teach the cloud how to run Nutanix. We already give you the template. You click, deploy to make that happen.
Right. And that's one of the big things about these cloud platforms is an element of security that you're scared because it's in the cloud, but there's lots of things going on around analytics and configurations that are probably better than most people's security approach in their own data center.
Yeah, agreed for sure. I mean, as we kind of talked about before, right? The public cloud providers have pretty much staked their whole business model on making this work. The worst thing that they can do is, end up having customer information get put out on the web because they did something bad from a security standpoint. They will have spent a whole lot more time, resources, staff training than what your normal type of company's data center has done or security team has done. But even with all of that, based on what Nutanix has built into their flexibility, whatever you're using on-prem that is integrated with your Nutanix deployment, you can still use out in the cloud. So, I mean, you've got the flexibility there as well as any other protection that you're getting by way of using the public cloud and being on their platform.
For a lot of on-prem networking, right, a lot of on-prem data center design, you have a high degree of difficulty, a high degree of specialization from the team and the tool set around the what do I need to secure and then how do I need to do it, right? Where do I draw the fences? And then the tooling for how to implement it. At least one of those is pretty different in the cloud, right? You still have to know your data and know what I need to put a fence around or put a moat and a fence around. But then the how you do it can actually be a lot easier to implement, right? And in some ways to actually then to audit after the fact well or monitor. And I think that's pretty cool, right? Is that if you've already spent that time establishing your beachhead in the cloud, right? If this is where I'm going to put my company's data within a certain cloud provider, we can deploy within that, right? We don't need you to pinhole that or larger than pinhole, poke holes in that, right? to say, oh, you want to run our platform? Yeah, it runs in that cloud provider, but it runs in its own special enclave we'll run it in your enclave so that your existing moat and perimeter stays in place, right? We're not changing any of that.
Yes, we use your current Swiss cheese. We don't need another.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just having flashbacks here. It's and this is a guy who used to work in the mailroom, right? It's the cloud providers and their security and what they've got going on. It's probably better than what the guy who used to work in the mailroom, who became an IT guy, can do all on his own. It takes a village, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yes, for sure.
All right, number 5, Harvey, you want to do a drum roll for us?
I think it's Jirah's turn this time.
So number 5 here, and this is in tech preview: hibernate, deactivate, and reactivate instances to control cloud costs. Are we talking about the actual nodes here that we're able to turn off an entire node and turn the volume down as needed, or is this just individual VMs?
No, this is referring to the nodes, the hardware bare metal instances, actually, that are the nodes that form the Nutanix cluster. Kind of one of the oldest tricks in the book for cloud cost savings is if you don't need it 24/7, turn it off when you're not using it. Right. Been that way for virtual machines for a very long time. Been a lot of assumptions, been baked into a lot of assumptions around cloud cost control for a long time. But it's true, right? If your business supports that, by all means, turn it off and pay less. So bringing that capability to clusters as well is pretty cool. So it's actually going to be basically a native feature. Click here to shut down the whole cluster, push it down to persistent cloud storage, and then bring it back onto running nodes when you need it. So, like you said, tech preview for now, but definitely going GA soon.
Yeah. Wow. That seems futuristic, but I guess in this world of the way this stuff's architected, especially around AWS and the maturity, it really isn't a big deal these days to have the ability to bare metal turn stuff on and off and rely on it.
Well, there's so many things that I can picture this being used for, right? Because in general, I mean, cloud is tough to make broad statements about, right? Because it's just cloud ultimately is just data centers and computers and tech, right? So it's about as broad as it possibly can be. But like one of the easiest use cases for cloud, right, is like that burstability, or I need a little bit of it. Even talking about like with Ruben last week, like frame and GPUs, right? Like to add a GPU to most on-prem VDI clusters of any vendor flavor, kind of a whole different science project, right? Of like, I got to add these GPUs to like these 2 nodes and run the desktops on those. Whereas it's like, well, but you can also rent a GPU powered VM in the cloud for like very, very, very little money, run it for 8 hours a day and not reinvent your on-prem data center. Same if like I have to run like high performance dev VMs, right? Cloud is often pay for performance, right? It's pay X for like ping and power, but pay Y for ping and power and performance all at the same time. Whereas if I can run these high performance dev VMs on a Nutanix cluster in the cloud, they're going to get native, very high streaming performance from day one. But I can turn all that off, right, for 16 hours while my developers are not working for the rest of the day.
Yeah. I like to think of this as a great big pause button.
Yeah. If I'm using this for DR, that ability for the cluster to wake up, receive a new replica from the on-prem cluster, go back to sleep. It's a really, really cool capability to envision.
Now, is that a situation where maybe I go ahead and provision 16 nodes, but I can have, 12 of them asleep all the time, and I wake them up when I need them, and they're kind of dedicated to being there, or is that not a reality?
I wouldn't do that one because I wouldn't even need that, right? I would do it as a 3-node cluster or however minimum nodes I would need to meet the storage target, and then put the whole cluster to sleep. Because like you can always grow and shrink a cluster, right? Add and eject nodes to change the cluster size. So from 16 down to 4 or 3. So I can do better than even having to hibernate the whole cluster. I can have a small cluster even when it does wake up.
Yeah. No, cool.
Yep. This is kind of like what you and I do every day, Andy. We go out and we make the little golden image guy, and we set him up and everything's ready, and we shut him down. And sometimes we need 5, sometimes we need 500, sometimes we need 5,000.
Right.
We just make it work based on that, however we need to do it.
And that really just highlights the world we live in today, which is software defined. And in this case, software defined, talking to these massive data centers that have scale beyond what we could ever provision for ourselves.
Right.
Well, guys, we've reached the end of this one. Any additional thoughts now that we've gone through the 5 elements that are called out here?
It just continues to reinforce what I've been feeling for years, and that's the new guys always get the fun toys. This used to be so hard, and now you can, go from I don't have anything to I've got a 16 node Nutanix cluster, by lunchtime. Yeah. Like, this is nuts.
I've got a customer that reached out to me this morning about building a cluster of hyperconverged, and I know it's in their best interest to start understanding how this works, because this is their future. How long do you think we are, guys, before the idea of an on-premises data center is just totally, for the most part, 80% gone?
What
That's a great question.
Is a colo here on-prem, or is a colo a flavor of cloud?
I think it's partly cloud and partly on-premises. So that really does murky it up.
My personal suspicion is, I think private data centers go out of fashion unless you are like a national or global level bank, where you own private data centers the size of colos. I do think private data centers and that kind of level of on-prem does go out of fashion. I think the next 10 years has us seeing a lot of customers finding that owned or constructively, creatively leased hardware in their own cabinets in a colo environment actually has a lot of cost benefit over going all in on public cloud.
Yeah. And then you're comparing this to the idea of having to still build and maintain data centers, which, you build one, you get 10 years out of it, but then you got to refresh it at some point. And then at that point, you're going, why am I still doing this?
Yeah, I think that's probably the more important determination of when that switch starts happening, is a data center cycle, right? By the time it's time to refresh, like you're alluding to, I think a lot of people start having the conversation of, why am I doing this? How much does it cost to not do this again? And when you look at the ability to take something like Nutanix and have it live in the public cloud and or, again, colo being an option as well, you get these benefits that, is hard to look past.
And Harvey, when I said that, did you take that as in the infrastructure or the actual power and cooling and all that other expensive stuff?
And again, that's kind of one of my earlier points, is this cost isn't just measured by dollars and hardware, right? You've got all of those other things that you have to account for. It's kind of, you also have to look at it as, how much of a headache am I willing to take on by continuing to do this, where I can watch the lights blink myself versus having somebody else take care of that for me.
Yeah. It's always been our North Star from a development standpoint, right? Is provide the on-prem user with a cloud-like experience, right? To say, click button, receive resource, receive storage, receive virtual machine instantly, right? And then automate or mask or
automate
extract all of the low-level value, right? Like I tell people every week, like patching like NIC firmware, or applying like a new BIOS update is it's a net neutral proposition to you as an IT practitioner. At most, nothing happens, right? And it's all worse from that. If you cause an outage or the maintenance window takes longer, none of that's a positive, like, you never get a pat on the back for doing that well, right? So the more we can automate and make it totally invisible for end users, the more we win, the more they win, right? Like that's the outcome.
That's exactly it. I mean, I give you a real world one that I was just thinking about. You think back 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you go into a hardware store and they got 50 different push lawnmowers for you to choose from. Go look in the hardware store now and see how many push lawnmowers they have.
Yeah.
It's
For
just, it's not like that anymore. You know, everybody doesn't have their little push lawnmower that they're out there pushing. You know, you've got lawn services everywhere that, you know, it's now just automated, right? It used to be they'd ride around and hope you'd let them cut your grass on this day, and maybe they'll come back in a couple of weeks and try it again. Now you got lawn service contracts that you don't need. It's all automated now. They just show up and do it. You don't even have to be there. So it's a different world, and I think things will continue to go that way, you know, for IT, and you know, after they've done that, then they'll move on to the next thing. And I have no idea.
Let's use that one. So I've got a $150 lawnmower. I've got a 19-year-old son getting ready to go off college, still lives with me. My grass is cut. Now,
but you pay for that differently. Raising the 19-year-old was not cheap, probably.
Well, that's true. The total cost of having that kid, would I have been better off just getting a lawn service, not having kids? Financially, you could easily argue.
Financially, right? But yeah, it's all about what problem you're trying to solve.
Well, and I've got a 12-year-old that's probably a year away from cutting the grass. So I've got 1 year now. I've got to go cut the grass again. Then I've got 6 more years of someone cutting my grass, and all I got to do is pay for the lawnmower and some gas.
See, that's the data center refresh cycle right there.
This past weekend, I had a little bit of a flashing on top of my house issue with the roof, and I had to go rent a 40-foot ladder, 35 feet up in the air, to fix something on my roof. And I'm going, why in the hell? And the reason why I was up there doing that is because I couldn't get anybody to come do that work. I could get someone to come pay. I could pay someone to come put a new roof on, but I couldn't come pay someone for $150 to come fix part of my roof. So here I am, you know, drill in one hand, hammer in the other, standing on one foot, going, man, if I get hurt, there's a lot of people that are going to get impacted by me not being here anymore.
I was just thinking, XenTegra corporate underwriters, please don't listen to that part. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's funny. I was thinking of it totally differently. Like when he was explaining that, I'm thinking to myself, now I'm not climbing a 40-foot ladder. I'm paying somebody for that. And then he said he couldn't find somebody to pay for it. And I'm like, all right, I guess I call Andy.
The moral of the story, you guys know what the moral of the story of that is? I'm about a couple years away from getting me a ranch house.
Yeah, buy a shorter house. Yeah, I was going to say.
Or a condo.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining. I appreciate you guys walking through this with us, and we'll pick another topic and do it again next week.
Talk to you then.
Any parting messages from you, Jirah, as far as what's going on in Nutanix world?
You can kick off a free trial of anything we talked about today for 30 days for free over at Nutanix.com.
Cool. Harvey?
If you have problems kicking off your trial or moving through it, you can call XenTegra.
Harvey, I know the answer to this, but we don't have any of our workshops scheduled now, but starting around July, we plan to get back into the business of getting those once a month up and going. So I guess people
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And
right,
in the meantime, in between time, we'll be happy to still set one up for you and go through it with you. And I'll, try to drag Jirah into it in some way, shape, or form.
I'm sure he'll come.
Looking forward to it.
2 for the price of none.
It's 5:00 on the East Coast, so Harvey, you only have about 2 hours of work left.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, guys, have a good night.
You too.
All right.